Hey everybody, so today I am here to share Sophie's reflux story. This has been highly requested ever since I posted my last infant reflux video, which was a while ago, but I will have that linked in the cards and also down below for you guys if you want to check that one out. I go over a lot of different things in that video, so I definitely would, if you're just like starting out and just trying to find more information about it, it's definitely a great place to start. But before I get into her story, there is a couple of things that I wanted to mention. First of all being, this is obviously not meant to replace or be any kind of medical advice. We had a team of doctors who helped both of the girls because both of my girls have suffered through reflux along with a lot of other things resulting from having reflux, and their team was amazing in helping figure out what plan of care was best for them, because everybody is an individual. What works for my girls isn't going to work for the next person, and what even worked for both girls is completely different. So I did want to mention that first and foremost. And also, this video is not meant to scare anybody. Just coming right out of the gate, both of my children have had very severe cases of reflux. It is something that unfortunately their father struggles with. They do feel like that plays a role in the severity of their cases, and I just don't want to come on here saying, oh, this is completely normal for infant reflux, when it normally isn't. It's very easily managed for a lot of people. However, our girls have struggled, and we have struggled with them in finding what works because they were severe cases, which kind of leads me back to the point of having a great medical team. If you feel like any part of your medical team, whether it's your GI, your pediatrician, any of the nutrition specialists, just anything at all, any part of your team is lacking, feel free to get a second opinion. Find whatever is the most comfortable and what works with your child. At the end of the day, you are your biggest advocate for your child, and you guys will hear through both of their stories how I have really came to understand that and own that. So don't be afraid to find whatever doctor you feel the most comfortable with. So I am going to get started with her story. I am going to say it's pretty long. I wrote down as many notes as I could. Now, I also want to remind you guys that Sophie is now 3 years old. She is a healthy, happy child, and this was a very taxing time in both the girls' lives. But now looking back on it, it does feel like a very small portion of their life. It's hard to imagine that. If you are in the thick of infant reflux, it is awful. It's awful. You never think that you're going to see the end of it, when your baby's going to be okay, when you're going to be okay. It's a lot. It is really a lot emotionally. So I understand being there, but looking back, it was really such a small part of her life, and she is a healthy and happy child now. So if you are there, my heart goes out to you, and just try to keep faith that eventually one day your child will be doing better, because I know that's hard, but I just wanted to also mention that she is healthy and happy now. So like I said, it's a long story. I'm going to be looking down a lot because she is 3 years old and this happened during the first year of her life. So it is a little hazy, but I wrote these notes a really long time ago, like back when I was really thinking, going through my personal Facebook feed and everything, trying to rack my brain and remember. Fortunately, I kept all the doctor's papers and everything else too, so that helped. But I am going to be looking down a lot so I can read. So from the beginning, Sophie was born. Everything was great. We had our newborn. We were so happy. And it was around a month old that I started noticing signs that I would later look back on and be like, yeah, that makes sense. So I just want to say before I mention them that these can be completely normal infant kind of symptoms, like just something newborns have and experience after birth. However, coupled with the fact that things progressively got worse, I think personally it was a warning sign for what was going to come. I just noticed a lot of hiccups, and I mean a lot of hiccups from Sophie. She was always coughing, or she was kind of like raspy in her voice, and slowly during the last month of her life she started spitting up. And like I said, that can all be normal for infants. You know, they have a lot of fluid in the womb and everything, so it is pretty normal for them to try and work as much up as possible. And at the rate that she had all those things, and especially with the coughing, she wasn't sick, so it just, I don't know, looking back, I figured it was normal newborn behavior. But when the spit up started, that's when I started paying closer attention to what she was doing as far as those things. And the spit up was very minimal at first, like very, very little, like enough to just kind of barely come out of her mouth. So it wasn't anything outrageous out of the gate. At around a month and a half, the amount of spit up she would do in like one sitting increased a lot just within a couple of weeks. So that's when I started looking up on the internet, which is always dangerous as a new mom. But I did start researching about reflux, and I became concerned because, like I said, she was also having other symptoms. So I put in a call to her pediatrician's office. I talked to the nurse there. We made an appointment. We took her in. They reassured me that everything was fine, that those were normal newborn behaviors, that spit up is okay as long as she's gaining correctly and she doesn't look lethargic or dehydrated and stuff like that. So I was basically told it's going to be fine, go home. And I also want to say that you are going to hear how many times I called the pediatrician, we went into the pediatrician's office, because if there's one thing I'm not afraid of, it's using that medical resource. In the United States, we pay way too much to not take advantage of those medical resources, so I by no means am shy about doing that. I will call, I will go in as many times as I feel needed. So that all happened around a month and a half. At 2 months old, the amount of spit up got even greater. I mean, I would put a bib on her and it would soak through the bib and it would soak through to her clothes. That's how much Sophie was spitting up all in one. And honestly, at this point, I would stop calling it spit up and I would start calling it vomiting, because honestly, it was that much that that's what it looked like. So obviously, we made an appointment to go back to the pediatrician. They actually weighed her that time and we found that she wasn't technically growing at what she should have been for weight wise on her growth curve. I mentioned how that was concerning to me, and I was told, no, it's gonna be fine, it's all right, you guys are doing what you're supposed to be doing. And our pediatrician told us to use gripe water and gas drops because she believed that was the reason that Sophie was kind of fussy after the spit up. That was also one of the reasons why I brought her into the pediatrician's office, was because after spitting up, she did seem to have quite a bit of discomfort, and we could normally console her, but it did take quite a bit of work. The week following this appointment was really kind of a blur when I think back to it, because it was just so taxing emotionally and even physically that I feel like it's a miracle that we made it through it, and that might be an exaggeration, but that's honestly what it feels like, because for the next week we spent holding a crying, screaming baby literally all day long. And I'm not using that figuratively. From the time she woke up to the time she went to bed, she was crying. I would stand and rock her and hold her and do all kinds of things to get her to calm down, and she would fall asleep for maybe like 5 minutes here or there, but honestly she wasn't napping during the day, which obviously newborns need sleep, so that makes them even more cranky when they can't get it. And it was just a vicious cycle. When Mark would get home, he would let me go take a shower, take a bath, take a freaking break, and he would sit there and he would try to console her, but she would just scream and scream and scream, and it was just heartbreaking on top of everything. Obviously, as a parent, you don't want to see your child in pain over anything, and as a new parent, you're not sure what they need. You're learning all of this just as they are, and it's really hard on everybody because of all these different emotions that's going on. But I think the most prevalent of all of them is just feeling kind of helpless and hopeless when it comes to how your baby's feeling. And we finally said enough is enough, because the gripe water obviously wasn't doing anything, the gas drops weren't. We were doing everything we could have. I forgot to mention, but I'm remembering now, at the very first appointment we were told to make sure that we were pace feeding from the bottle, which we were using really slow flowed nipples anyways, but we still did the pace feeding. And honestly, that was taxing in and of itself, because Sophie hated paced bottle feeding. Like, that kid would down a bottle in 2 seconds if you would let her, but we didn't let her. And everything all together, we were just like, enough. So we scheduled another appointment, and we got in within like a week's time, and we found at that appointment that Sophie had dropped a significant amount of weight, and obviously that sent alarm bells ringing. I mean, I feel like I was already kind of on high alert from the last time when she wasn't gaining as much as what she should have, and especially when newborns lose weight after steadily gaining weight for the first month of their life, it is alarming. So we were told, okay, yeah, something is going on here. We're going to prescribe you some Zantac, which is Ranitidine or something. I can't ever pronounce the generic brand. But basically generic Zantac, and that's what you're gonna have to give her every day. And also we were told to start giving her cereal in her bottles while we got approved for human milk fortifier. Now I know not everybody's going to agree with that, but that's what we decided as parents we were comfortable with. I also want to throw in here that cereal in a bottle is a choking hazard and it's not recommended unless you have pediatrician guidance. Like I said, we made decisions as parents. You're going to have to make decisions as parents as to what you're comfortable with. Some people are comfortable with it, some people aren't. It's really, to me, a risk versus reward, and you have to kind of weigh those options, but I did want to throw that in here. Human milk fortifier, if you don't know, is basically, it's breast milk that is broken down, and it's to basically add extra calories to existing breast milk. I was exclusively pumping, I'm sorry, I should have said that from the start. I was exclusively pumping with Sophie. So we were giving everything in bottles to her, and she was getting 100% breast milk. So this human milk fortifier would go into the breast milk, it would give her extra calories. Now, cereal is not going to thicken breast milk. I know a lot of people get that advice. I'm not here to combat that. I'm just saying, scientifically speaking, it's not going to thicken breast milk because the enzymes in breast milk break the cereal down before it can thicken it. So we were not using it as a thickening agent. You need a gum-based thickener for breast milk. That is going to be something I mentioned in Remy's story, but anyways, so we were just using the cereal strictly for the calorie intake because she was so young. We couldn't spoon feed her the cereal, but that's what we went home with. We went home with a prescription for Xanax, which we picked up right away. We were told to put the cereal in the bottle while we waited for approval for the human milk fortifier. The pediatrician had told us that it would take several days for the Zantac to work, so we waited a week and a half to see any results, giving it religiously exactly how both the pediatrician and the pharmacist had told us to give it, and we did not see any change in Sophie whatsoever. And we took her back because obviously things weren't working, and also I wanted to check her weight. At that visit, we found out that Sophie lost even more weight, and the pediatrician told us to be patient, to give time for things to work, and everything would be fine. And that's the moment that I lost my patience altogether. Now, looking back, I do feel guilty. I'm pretty mad at myself that I let it go on for as long as I did without standing up and doing something different earlier, but I can't do anything about it now. I can only learn from that experience. I was naive to just blindly trust my pediatrician even when I had this gut feeling that something was wrong. And if you are that mom, that you have a gut feeling that something else needs to be happening, go get a second opinion, a third opinion, a fourth opinion, whatever it is, because you know your child best. That is the one thing looking back that I regret out of Sophie's story, is that I took a little too long to act. I feel like in that position at that time, I didn't know any better. So I feel like I was doing best with what I had, and I try not to be hard on myself now because she is a healthy child and we got past it and I learned from it. But at the end of the day, the guilt is still there. So it was at that point that I said, no, enough. And the pediatrician we had, she was at a practice that also had two other pediatricians. So I said, I want to see a different pediatrician. And so that's when we met our second pediatrician. And she looked at all the notes, all of Sophie's medical history and everything. And she found Sophie's case to be really, really urgent and kind of alarming. At this point, Sophie was 3 months old and she had lost over 2 pounds. So this new pediatrician put a rush on for us to be approved for the human milk fortifier. She also had us try a new prescription, and she wanted us to double the amount of oatmeal cereal. Hopefully I'm in the same spot because my camera died. But anyways, it was after this appointment that we also had a very serious conversation. The pediatrician let us know that if Sophie lost any more weight at all, whether it was 1 ounce or 1 pound, she was going to be hospitalized, and we were going to have to talk about tube feeding and some very serious discussions. And this conversation like broke my heart. It really, really broke my heart. I can't even put into words what that feels like, to be told that your child might be hospitalized and they might have to be tube fed. And you know, because you're supposed to be doing everything right, we were doing as much as what we possibly could have done for Sophie, but at the end of the day it seemed to not be working. And it really was like a time factor because there wasn't really a lot more that we could do. And over the next couple months, we just worked really hard. It's a blur when I think back to it, because honestly, there were so many appointments and weight checks and pharmacy pickups and all kinds of stuff, that it was just honestly a scramble to get her back on track. And I will say that during this 2 months, we had tried a couple more different medications, none of which seemed to make a difference. I did want to say that between the Zantac and the next prescription, she wasn't on anything. And that's when we noticed a kind of attitude difference with Sophie. She was happy. Regardless of the fact that she was having weight issues, she was vomiting, she was happy. She was no longer crying all the time. She wasn't fussy. Really, the biggest thing with Sophie was just the fact that she vomited after she ate. So we did give a couple different medications a try, but when her mood was already fine and it wasn't helping her weight gain, it also wasn't helping the amount of vomiting, it didn't make sense. So we decided to not have her on any medications, and we just stuck with the oatmeal cereal on top of the breast milk. Now, Sophie took as much breast milk as she was supposed to for an infant her age. I do believe she ate 5 ounces every 3 hours on the dot from the moment she woke up to when she went to bed. She did sleep through the middle of the night, and I tried to dream feed her, but she wanted absolutely nothing to do with that. But she was consistent on that. She liked eating. She never gave us a hard time about it. It was just always after. You had to expect Sophie to throw up. For the most part, it was just Mark and I who held Sophie and who fed her. It was mainly because I didn't want to explain all the different things that it goes into feeding a reflux baby, because you have to hold her a certain way, you have to hold her a certain way after she's done eating, you have to expect to be thrown up on, just a lot of different things. Of course, there was random people here and there that were like very persistent and they did feed her, but if you fed Sophie, you were going to get thrown up on, and that was just a fact you need to understand. The cereal, at this point, we were able to spoon feed her because she could sit in a high chair, not completely unassisted, but we could water it down to where it was doable for her. That way we didn't have to put it in the bottle anymore, which is obviously safer. So it was at around 6 months we went back for our weight check, and she had finally gained 2 ounces. The 2 months she had maintained, which was awesome, because like I said, if she had lost any weight, she would have been hospitalized, and I'm just fortunate that what we were doing was finally starting to obviously make a difference. And then when we saw that just between the breast milk and the cereal that she was starting to finally gain weight, it was just, I can't even begin to tell you the amount of relief that we all felt. Like, it was a moment in the room for all of us, because it was the pediatrician who was weighing her, and her dad and I were there, obviously, and it was just such a moment for all of us who had been through so much, and we were just so hoping to get this little girl back on track. Never mind the fact that she was a completely happy baby who was meeting milestones and everything, which we're very fortunate for, because at least her reflux wasn't affecting that side of her. But at the same time, weight is a serious issue. And it was at the end of this pediatrician's visit that the printout from the visit, where it lists medical conditions, that I actually found out that she had been diagnosed with GERD and failure to thrive, but they made sure to not put that on previous ones because they didn't want to scare me. Now, a lot of people might have had a problem with that, but in that moment, and even looking back now, honestly, I don't have any kind of hard feelings about it. I honestly thanked the pediatrician for doing that, telling me that my daughter, in those moments where we still didn't know what was going on, everything was urgent, and we were looking at hospitalization, focusing on the fact that she did have GERD, or that she was failure to thrive, would have just focused my energy on where she was, not where she needed to be. And that was the goal with Sophie. It was to get her better, not to focus on where she was right now. But seeing those under her medical conditions and seeing that she was diagnosed with them, it was kind of hard. It was just a kind of eye-opening into like how serious her condition was and how dire everything was, and how I'm really just fortunate that we were able to find what worked for her and get her back on track. And it was around 7 months that Sophie started vomiting less. At first it was just like, oh, it doesn't go all the way down to her pants, oh, it's not soaking completely through the bib, oh, she really doesn't need to wear a bib, and it just slowly progressed like that. It just became less and less of a thing, and it was by 9 months old that she was not vomiting really that much. Every once in a while she would, but by a year she had no vomiting whatsoever after feedings. Honestly, it felt like night and day, even though it was a process to get her there. To go from a baby who was vomiting so much for, you know, a long period of her first year of life, to go to being able to have her in a car seat, not worry about if I brought extra bibs or extra clothes in the diaper bag, and not worrying when they were going to get thrown up on, because it wasn't a matter if, it was a matter of when. And just all those things, it slowly became a new way of life for us. And around that 7-month mark, when she did start vomiting less, we decided to kind of wean her away from the oatmeal cereal and start focusing on other solids. We had been introducing other foods here and there, but because of her dietary restrictions, because certain foods can cause flare-ups in children, we were only introducing certain things. So at that point, when she was vomiting less, we were able to introduce her to other things, and it just slowly, like I said, became a new way of life. It's not to say that Mark and I had been miserable for the months previous, but it's just, you know, when your child has a medical concern, it does seem to take up a lot of your energy. And of course we were taking, you know, those good moments and those good days where we could get them, but they were kind of far and few between. And to finally have this way of life that was like, she seemed to completely be in a different area health-wise, and she was finally gaining and thriving. I'm not sure how this goes with failure to thrive. I'm not sure if it is a pediatrician's kind of call. I didn't ask specifics on it, but our pediatrician, she likes to see so much weight gain or growth over a certain amount of period for the failure to thrive diagnosis to go away. And I don't believe that Sophie got rid of that diagnosis until she was like 1.5 to almost 2 years old. It was somewhere in there that the pediatrician finally let us know that that was no longer going to be under her medical conditions, which was great. But luckily, Sophie did not have any kind of long-term effects, at least from what we can see from the GERD, the reflux, and just everything else, thankfully. Like I said, looking back now, it feels like a short time in her life, but in those moments, it felt like it took so long to get answers. It felt like it took so long to figure out what worked for her, and to just see your baby gain weight. And it really just opened my eyes to how different your life can be when you have a child. You know, when you're pregnant, you just expect to deliver this healthy baby and everything's great, and you're just going to go on with your life. And that's not always the case. Of course, there's worse things that children can have, and there's better things that children can have. It's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of every illness and disease or whatever your child may be struggling with. But with Sophie, it was just a really eye-opening experience for us to not be so naive that every child is going to come out and be perfectly healthy for the rest of their lives. I'm not really sure how to explain this next part either. All I can say is, you know, when you have the stomach flu and you're like, oh, I'm not going to take for granted the fact that, you know, I don't barf all the time, or I'm not sick, or like whatever it is, you always promise yourself that, oh, I'm not going to take this for granted. That's what I felt like with the weight checks. You know, it was just like, I just wanted that weight, I just wanted that scale to go in the right direction. I would just stare at it and stare at it when they would be doing these weight checks, and I'm like crossing my fingers and my toes and just hoping that it would finally go in the right direction. And it's like, I will never take for granted any kind of weight gain any of my children ever have, because I spent so long staring at scales. I spent so long hoping that they went the right direction and watching them go the wrong direction. And it's just, it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with as a reflux parent. If you are a reflux parent and you're scrubbing seat belts in your car seat, if you are taking showers and getting vomit out of your hair, and you are washing bibs and baby clothes like it's just nothing else in this world, I feel you. I've been there. There is a huge community of people that I will link down below. Most of them are Facebook groups, but I did find a couple websites helpful as well. But those Facebook groups are really what got me through it. A lot of people did not understand Sophie's condition. They didn't understand what it meant for Mark and I. They didn't understand. And it's not their fault. I didn't hold that against them. But with that feeling, you can feel alone. And I don't want you to feel like that, because there are other parents and other children out there struggling with reflux. So I'm going to link some support groups down below. They were just absolutely key in making me feel like I wasn't just the only parent dealing with this, because it can feel a little bit like you're stuck on this hamster wheel and nobody else can help you figure it out. So I want you guys to know that there's support, whether you're a mom, a dad, a guardian, whatever, you know, there is support for you. I'll link that down below. Try to keep that hope that one day things are going to be different, that your child will be doing better, and I hope that you guys do get through it. I hope you guys do find what works. I hope that sharing Sophie's story, some other parents can feel less alone, and like I said, it's not meant to be like a medical advice or me telling you what you should do, because every child is going to be different. Sophie probably should have responded to medication. Sophie probably should have done this and you know, whatever. And everybody's going to have a take on what your child should be doing or what your parenting decision should be. But at the end of the day, it's parents who make the decision. It's decisions that we make thinking what's going to be best for our child, and that's all you can really do. And try to be an advocate and speak up when you feel like things should be different. And just, like I said, try not to be too hard on yourself because you're going through a lot right now. I will also have my other infant reflux video linked for you guys as well. But I hope you guys enjoy the video, and as always, thanks for watching.